Oh, come on in. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay.
Morning, everyone. Thought I'd do a first dog walk video of 2022. I'd say you have no idea how cold it was up here, but I suppose everybody that works outside or anything like that for a living does have an idea of how cold it is this morning. So yeah, it's chilly. It's 2022. Not an awful lot's happening at the minute, but I thought I'd come online, talk about probably the two big bits of news. One, obviously, Morgan Whittaker, which we have covered in the podcast, which I'll talk about, and then Sunderland signing Trey Hume yesterday, which I wanted to touch upon as well. I just really wanted to get a little bit of a video out there. Every time I see people, a lot of people at the football ground, somebody always says, I watch your dog videos. I like your dog walk videos. And I never really think about doing them. The dog's not often on it, to be honest. There's farm vehicles and stuff like that, and it always amazes me that people tune in and watch me talking about Lincoln walking the dog. So thank you to the 24 of you who are online now. I'm assuming that some of you have probably off work with the Rona, so if that's true, I hope you feel better soon. So obviously Morgan Whittaker, I'm going to touch on it first of all. People say it was the worst kept secret. It wasn't a secret, was it? I think the club can't come out and say in January we intend to sign Morgan Whittaker, because until the paperwork's submitted, it's my understanding that the deal could still collapse. So it's not secret, they're just being cautious, I think. But it was always going to be the case. It's really a similar situation to Morgan Rogers the year before, except we weren't waiting on Rogers on deadline day. We weren't hinging probably, the difference between struggling and, struggling not quite as much on one player. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously it's a decent signing. It's a good starter for 10, isn't it? I'm not going to say that's it now, we're going to start climbing the league, because I think there are other problems in and around the squad which need to be addressed. There are senior players who at the beginning of this season you expected to do very well who are not doing well. So, it'd be wrong of me. I'm not, contrary to what people say, I'm not a happy clapper. I'm not going to come on here and this is the beginning of the rest of the well, I say the beginning of the rest of the season, it is, but the beginning of the resurgence, because there's still work to do. But I think the club know that. I think the fact that we've gone in for Whittaker so early, gone in hard. I mean, I got that notification while I was still in bed shivering like a pooing dog on New Year's Day morning. So it was, let's get this done, let's get this over the line, let's get this announced, let's give supporters something to cheer. And maybe not you, but I certainly cheered when the Ipswich and Rotherham games were cancelled. I would have much preferred the MK Dons game to be cancelled as well, because let me tell you this, Morgan Whittaker in that team on Boxing Day and we win the game. And I'm no ifs or buts, because even if we concede 3, I think we created enough chances to score 4 against what was a weak MK Dons side. And let's be brutally honest, a player, and when I say Morgan Whittaker, I mean on form, and I mean the videos that we've seen of him, the player that we believe that we're getting, because we might get another Dannon Lunderloo who hasn't performed, so you don't know. But when I say Morgan Whittaker, I mean a striker who looks like he's going to put the ball in the back of the net. We beat Accrington, who were shit. We beat Hartlepool and we were in the FA Cup third round because they were poor, and their goalkeeper, it was like when you come on FIFA and you realise that somebody's put their centre back in goal. He's flapping at the ball and everything. We still couldn't beat him. So, and probably we played last night or tonight against Harrogate in the Mickey Mouse Trophy, because they were all games that with a half decent striker or a person who wanted to make runs in behind, we beat those teams. We do. And I think you say the same probably of Doncaster as well from earlier in the month. I think even Shrewsbury, who we drew 1-1 with, we know that we're just looking at what looked like a relatively complete team. But as the weeks have gone by, I think slowly 1 or 2 other players have lost their confidence. I certainly think you look across the back and you can see 1 or 2 players who are not doing what you hoped for them to do. Fingers crossed. TJ, of course, had a very good game, I thought, against MK Dons. Hopefully that's the start of something else. I thought Regan Poole was arguably putting one of the best centre-back performances on the day that we've seen. And we've been relying an awful lot on Lewis Monsmer as our main defender, and I think at times he's drifted in and out of form. At left back, Obviously, Jamie Robson hasn't settled yet, which is why he's probably been left out recently. But I don't think Cohen Bramall's a left back. I think he's a League Two left wing back, probably, if anything. So we shall see. We shall see. But look, as I said, it's a great starter because it's a signal of intent, and you would sincerely hope that there are. When I say significant, I don't think we're going to sign 10 players this transfer window. That's the sign of a desperate manager. I don't think we've got a desperate manager. I think we've got a manager who's known ever since the last transfer window closed what the situation was, and then slowly but surely he's lost more players to injury. And I don't think there's light at the end of the tunnel there. If Tom Hopper had been back, and I know it's all ifs and buts, and I buy that. But, we're looking at the new year now, and we still don't know if Tom Hopper's coming back. We still don't know when Joe Walsh is coming back. And I think really we've got to park those players, and we've just got to go, right, we don't have a number 9. We don't have a left-sided centre-back. When they come back, brilliant, they'll be like new signings. But we can't keep seeing when they come back, because otherwise you get to 38, 39 games, and like, we'll go through the comments, but like Kev Barway says, you've rolled up for a relegation scrabble. It's a bit late after 39 games to get those players back and go, right, they're going to save us now. Just like it was too late last season when we got Liam Bridcut, Tom Hopper and George Grant back after the awful form we'd had over March, which cost us an automatic place. So, I'm not going to go into the injuries. Michael said he's had one of the worst seasons of his life for injuries. It's certainly, as a Lincoln City fan, I've never known an injury situation like it. I've watched some training. I'm not going to pass comment on that. I'm not a sports scientist. I think 1 or 2 training injuries were prevented under the previous regime because players weren't training. And maybe the players that you have at that stage, the Michael Boswicks in League Two, remember, League Two, different level. Maybe it was easier to have the Boswicks and the Shackles not training and then turning up and kind of going in for 1 or 2 games. Whereas, I think when you're a team like us competing with financial heavyweights, the training and the coaching is the strength that we have. So you have to put those minutes in. You can't just say, turn up on Saturday and put a couple of badass tackles in, Mr. Boswick, and everybody will go, yeah, well done. You can't do that when you're Michael Appleton working. And it is a restricted budget in terms of those around us. It's a better budget than we had last year. But, with the inflation of costs, it's actually a lower budget in terms of what it can buy you. So I think it's particularly interesting. Good, dog's still following me. So and look, and then yesterday I was a little bit upset to hear that Trey Hume had signed for Sunderland. I wasn't surprised. There's been no official confirmation, and there never would be, because he was somebody else's player until he became Sunderland's player, and then he's still somebody else's player. So there was no confirmation that we were in for Trey Hume. It was my understanding that we had spotted a fullback in Ireland that we thought was going to be a gem. Reports coming out of Ireland suggested that was Trey Hume. Put 2 and 2 together, you can come up with 5, but I think it was a 4. I'd heard a whisper before Christmas from a friend of a friend, a contact of a contact, that sort of thing, that Trey Hume had visited the club, that he'd visited the training facilities. And I was actually quite confident up until probably a couple of days before New Year that actually the talk of other teams coming in and all that was, we were going to see a double announcement on New Year's Day. I genuinely felt that. But you've got to look at it this way. A 19-year-old boy, he's come over, he's seen Lincoln City, decent club, good facilities, 4th from bottom in the league, 3rd, He's then gone to Sunderland, bigger club, better facilities, and that's no criticism of us. Top of the league, potential to go into the Championship, probably paying more money. So I was disappointed. I didn't see Trey Hume coming in and impacting the first team. But again, that's all kind of pundit speculation, isn't it? Because we don't know how good these players are until we've seen them. We heard with Dan and Lunderloo at the beginning of the season. 12 of the League One teams after Dan and Lunderloo. 12 of the League One teams. We beat them all to it. I was delighted. 12 Premier League appearances, a senior goal for Southampton. This boy's going to be the Ellis Sims, who was great for Blackpool. He's going to be our Ellis Sims. He's going to be our kind of knight in shining armour. And he's disappointed. But when he first arrived, I would have argued with anybody. So you could say the same about Morgan. You could say the same about Trey Hume. On paper, lots of signings are good. Not sure about Hal Robson-Khan, who I keep hearing about. I always think about, what's that song my dad used to sing, Yesterday's Man? That's not the sort of signing that we're going to make, in my opinion. If we were going to sign free agent Hal Robson-Kanu, we would have done it when we desperately needed a free agent number 9. In my opinion, I might be wrong. So that's that, really. I've heard a couple of rumours, as I'm sure you have. I'm happy to address those. You know, one of the rumours that's been going around is about a player from last season who left us in the summer. Mr. Grant, that would be, I think that's a typical Lincoln City transfer rumour, transfer window rumour, isn't it? You know, George Grant's coming back. Is he? It's the same sort of rumour that did the rounds when Danny left and everyone said George Grant was leaving. You know, he's a Lincoln City favourite. Excuse me. Always will be. And he's bound to be linked. Like, he's playing regularly for Peterborough. And even if the Peterborough fans on banter sites are saying they don't like him, they want him to go back, and he takes one numpty to go, who's going back to Lincoln? And then it snowballs. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. There's been talk about another former Lincoln City player, isn't there, on loan with us for 6 months, Mr. Walker. Now, I know he's struggling at Coventry. Would be a major, major statement of intent. But again, you have to look at it this way. At the moment, we're 4th from bottom in the division. He's going to be on big money that we're probably not going to pay. You know, there's probably more legs in that one, but it's not something that I've heard from what I would class as, you know, like solid gold source. So I think we just have to be patient and calm. I know we've talked about bad transfer windows, and look, the summer right now doesn't look like a good transfer window, but as Michael said in his interview, who's to say that isn't they're not the deals that come good the following season? And look, I think when we signed Teo Eden, for instance, he came in, he played midfield, he got battered off the ball a little bit. I liked him, but he looked, you know, people said he looked lightweight, and then he got sent off, and then Max Melbourne replaced him at left back, and he went into the next season kind of on the bench. And at that point, you might have said he wasn't a good signing. Fast forward 12 months, and he's a championship player who could be our record sale. So, yeah, there is some perspective with the players that we've signed, I think, in the summer, and to start talking about worst Lincoln City signings ever, which I am doing on the site sort of over a longer period of time. I don't think you can ever talk about players that are currently in the squad, because, I mean, Tom Pett, poor for 6 months when he first signed. Poor for 6 months. Superb in the title winning season. Absolutely superb. So, you know, we've got to give these players time. I personally believe, and you can laugh at me if you want, I'm sure many of you will, I think Lasse Sorensen is going to be a hell of a player for us. I think Lasse is a player who has got some technical ability. I think he works very, very hard. I've never doubted his application, and there's been one or two of the other new signings. You think, run for it, or they're arguing with other people, or they don't look particularly interested. With Lasse, I've never got that. With Lasse, I've always got the attitude, I think, is right, and I think the attributes are there. It's about aligning those. So I think that Lasse Sorensen will be a big signing for us. I think that long term, I think, you know, loan players okay. Lewis Fiorini is a decent player. He's been in and out of form. Dan Lundaloo was in form for 2 games. So on the face of it, it didn't look like a great transfer window. But Josh Griffiths has been superb, arguably better than Alex Palmer was. He's had a lot more to deal with. I think TJ Ayoma's still a great signing. I think with TJ, what you've had is 6 months of realisation that I'm not a Premier League footballer on loan anymore. And I'm hoping that what we saw from him against MK Dons, which we know he can do, is the start of something good. And, you know, TJ was still a massive signing for this football club. Make no mistake about it. We beat teams who are much higher than us in the pyramid to TJ's signature. And I think TJ is the Teo Eden of next year. You know, I think that next year TJ Ayoma becomes the player he was for us last season, playing week in, week out, putting the top performances in, possibly even at right back rather than centre back, and then potentially earning us some money. So when you look at it that way, it's great. It's easy to say what an awful transfer window it is, or it was. But actually, if you add some context, although it obviously wasn't a brilliant one, I'm not gonna claim that. Was it any worse than you look back at the transfer window where we signed James Wilson, and we signed Tom Pett, and we signed Lee Frecklington, and you look back at that and you think, well, Freck was a huge signing at the time, but he was injured very quickly into the next season, against Port Vale when we won 6-2, and probably never recovered from that. Pet was awful for 6 months, barely got a kick, looked lightweight. And looking back, we're at the same stage now as we would have been at the end of those first 6 months. So you could quite easily have said Pet was not a good signing. James Wilson came from having played regular League One football to play in League Two and never really did anything for us. Arguably would have been on more money. And so you kind of got to look at those in context. It wasn't the best transfer window we could have had. Time will tell us how good or bad it is. And I think that's been evident from the names that have been suggested for the worst ever Lincoln City signing, which I think we're up to about 64 now. So we've signed some toss in the day, but very few of those players came in the 2006-2007 winter window, which many argue was the worst transfer window we ever had and cost us promotion that season. But none of the players that we brought in were the so-called worst. And we brought Danny N'Guessan in and Paul Green in, and I think Nicky Eden came in on a permanent deal. They were half decent players for this club. So I'm not saying that this was a brilliant transfer window for us. That would be madness. But he knows it wasn't. Michael will tell you that he came out of it probably 3 players short from what he wanted. Almost certainly think that he would have wanted another forward player, and the injuries haven't helped. But that's why we've got to just, as fans, and there's no choice, just got to sit back, wait for what happens this transfer window to happen, and just remember that actually, although we've slipped into the bottom 4, it was unavoidable from not playing games. And I think that when we do eventually get to play Rotherham and Ipswich again, we'll have a stronger squad and a better chance of taking a point or 2 from those games. They're not the games that keep you up. The games that keep us up are, Morecambe at Sincil Bank, Doncaster at Sincil Bank, playing, the likes of Cheltenham, I think have still got to come to Sincil Bank. So lots still to, when I say look forward to, it's like with trepidation, isn't it? It's the first time probably since Gary Simpson, maybe even before Simpson, might be one of the first times really since Holdsworth that we've looked and thought we could go down. I don't think we will. I think we've got enough to stay up. I think when we do what we do right and the players are on form, we've shown how much better we can be, beating Cambridge 5-1. There wasn't a team that last season that came to Sincil Bank, bar Rotherham, that I didn't think we had the potential to beat. And there was only Portsmouth on the day that I thought we were so bad that we deserved to lose. Every other game we played at Sincil Bank, I felt we were good enough to take something from it. Bolton, we lost 1-0. We could just have easily won 1-0. Accrington, we should have won that game. Ipswich were poor for all the riches that they've got. They're screaming about missing out on this game. They're in good form. They say they've got this, that, and the other. They say, if I was them, I'd be wanting to let their manager get settled in before playing the likes of Lincoln City. I really would. But there we go. Right, let's have a look at some of these comments before I wind up. So, morning to my good friend Pete. Hope you're well. Morning to James. Good morning, my friend. Morning to Mr. Barlow. All the best for 2022. Same to you, chaps and chapesses. Mr. Robertson, not far away from me. Frost on the ground when riding through Hubbard's Hills this morning. It's cold. I mean, I don't know if you see. I suppose it's the same everywhere, but it's just white over here. I went to the cinema last night in Louth. Came out to my car to set off at 7:30, and my car was white over with frost. I mean, it is cold, cold, cold. Kev Green, hello, mate. Happy New Year. Jason Addison, Happy New Year. Robo Mank, Happy New Year. See you soon. Buzzing for the games. For me, it's been a while, win, lose, or draw. The Bionic Mank, okay. Robocop Mank, Bionic Mank, I like that. Any belief in the outgoing rumours from Mr. Pierce? And I think I've got another one of those, which I'll can't find now. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, someone comes in and offers us £500,000 for Anthony Scully, we take it and reinvest. And I'm not saying that's the model. I'm saying that's League One football. Very, very few teams turn down good money for their best players. It's how you progress. And, I think too, people talk about Blackpool last season, started badly and climbed up the league. I don't think that's us. Don't think we're going to be making a late run to the playoffs. I think it would be ludicrous to suggest so. But I think about Oxford a couple of seasons ago when they got into the playoff. I think they got into the playoffs. They might have just challenged top 10, but think they got into the playoffs. Then the following season, they spent nearly the whole season ambling around the bottom 6. And I think in the last 10 games, they managed to elevate and finish 10th because there was about 6 points separating the playoffs and the bottom 4 at one point. I think it was the year Southend came down, not the year we came up. Might have been. So, yeah, no, outgoings, I think that's almost what you have to do, because there's been years where Oxford have been really good. And I use Oxford as an example because I think we're a similar sized team. They sold Tariq Fosu and Shandon Baptiste for what, 6 million combined a couple of years ago. And that's what we've got to do. And bear in mind, they signed Fosu after he was released on a free transfer from Charlton Athletic. And I think we were in for him as well. That was the summer Danny summer before he left. So, you know, I think it's always been our intention to cultivate players since we've moved into League One. And again, you look at George Grant, for example, signed before Michael. You then look at Teo, Anthony Scully, Lewis Monsma. Not sure about Monsma, but I think Scully's incredibly saleable. So we shall see. What wouldn't surprise me is if we don't look, if a team wants Scully, we look at who might be in their reserves and think that might be a good way of getting a player back as well as some profit, particularly if it was a Coventry, for instance, who were going, quite like the look of Anthony Scully. Do you? Well, that's just that's interesting because we like the look of a boy on your bench. Mr. Barwise, sleeves rolled up for a relegation scrap. I'm going to back MA from now on, despite having my doubts recently. I think a lot of people have doubted MA, Michael. Not myself personally, not because I'm a bumlicker or a happy clapper. I just haven't. He's not the same personality that we've had before, and I think, you know, some people like the drum banging and the fist pumping and all that sort of stuff. But with Michael, there's a pragmatism, and I have been lucky because, as you know, I've met him and I've interviewed him, and he's very honest. He's very straight talking. When you're around the training ground, and you know, again, very privileged to have visited, you can kind of see that it isn't a bad mood around the training ground. It isn't kind of a massively negative mood. They obviously deal with the issues that we've got, but it's not like there's an us and them. It's not like you see players mooching around with their shoulders down. There's one or two players that I spoke to, and I won't say who, that you get the impression that they're not happy with their game time. But that's always been the case. I remember interviewing James Wilson when we were in our title winning season, and he was saying he was off the record, wasn't happy playing right back and wanted more games and hadn't come to sit on the bench kind of thing. And I got the same impression from the keeper, Grant Smith, when I interviewed him. So it's not unusual. You know, if you're a teacher and you've got a class of 30 and you're the highest achieving class in the school, it's going to be one or two that still sit there thinking this is shit because they're not at the top of the class. So I don't think there's a widespread problem. I think the problem within a dressing room is when your key players are against your manager. I think that's when you need to worry. Like Chelsea at the moment, I know they've got the money and the numbers to kind of get around it. But look at the way Lukaku's behaving. If we had a Liam Bridcut, a Tom Hopper, a Conor McGrandles behaving in that manner, then I would have a little bit more concern. And I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, on the outgoings if Conor McGrandles doesn't go. Timing of the news piece recently, the snippets that I've heard about personal circumstances, I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm not, you know, we know that he hasn't been as good this season. Nobody has. I think if we've been playing well, Conor McGrandles would have looked better. So they're probably not going to reflect too much on that. He was very, very good for us last season. And I think if he goes with, you know, a certain status. He did well for the club and the best wishes. So, Leslie, Happy New Year to you. It's a new year, a new start. Let's have some positivity and back the team. I think that's a great message. Brian Rundle says, beautiful backdrop on a frosty morning. Yeah, it is if you're sat in the warm, Brian. It's not so good if you're walking out here. It's bloody freezing. Mr. Summers, Happy New Year to you, pal. We've not spoken yet. Given all the talk about progressing youngsters, do you think that the lack of game time for the likes of Sanders, Ayoma and Rowan might make signing Premier League players led by Premier League clubs trickier? Interesting. I think, yeah, it's an interesting point. But then you look at Eden moving on, you look at Scully getting lots and lots of interest, you look at like Fiorini getting lots of game time when they're on loan. So I think it swings and roundabouts. And I think Sanders is an odd one And I think he's destined to be one of those players that fans see one thing and clearly the manager sees another, and I'm not sure what it is. But I really like Sanders. And with Rowan, I don't know. I think because Rowan's come out of our own academy, there's a certain amount of maybe leeway when players are coming to us. I think Premier League players are going to look more at the players that we've developed and moved on. So, and even ones that have been loaned, like Brennan Johnson, they'll look at him and go, well, if I've got his ability and I go to Lincoln City and I get game time, that's going to be good for me. And I think that's what we'll see with Morgan Whittaker. But I take on board the point that I think if you were a team that was just signing young players and playing them no matter what, you almost get an air of the Chris Sutton. Back in 2009-10, we signed Matt Saunders, Chris Hurd, Eric Lehigh, Nathan Baker. He signed a lot of good youngsters, but put them all in at once. Michael Uwezu, I seem to remember, came. Joe Anderson came. And there was an element there of, are we just a youth team? So I think Premier League clubs advise their players, and I think they're not just going to look at game time, but they're going to look at the overall club setup. And I think the fact that Eden wasn't playing at the beginning of last season, got into the side and proved himself, is almost like a strong message to those players, isn't it? If you go to Lincoln and put the effort in, you do well, potentially. What do I know? I'm not a Premier League scout, so let's have a look. Pete again talked about players being fit or not, and was surprised by players being fit to play, but not fit to train under the old regime. I wonder if that needs to change to get their form improving. What do you mean if we don't have, so like we prioritize playing games over training? I think that goes back to my other point, though, that if you're one of the bigger spending teams in the league, as we were in League Two, you can afford Michael Bostwick not to train because he knows what his job is. Come in, kick people, look angry, growl a little bit, done your job. Shackle played so many games that he's like one of those dads that turns up to play with the kids, and he doesn't train every week, but he still turns up and does well. And for one season he did. So I think when you're us now, you've got to work harder on the training field to make up the kind of the gap in funding and make up that kind of the chasm that has opened between the top 12 and the bottom 12, of which we're a part financially, I think. So I take the point on board, but again, what cost? At what cost did we do that? Bozzy went off to Burton, never got an adequate run of games since. Just signed for Stevenage. Neil Eardley, played loads and loads of games for us. 6 months for Burton, has disappeared. Sam Habergam never really played again, has he? On and off for Grimsby. So at what cost to the players do you kind of do this? And I think, I don't know, fans would say, well, you do it anyway and bugger them in a year's time because we've got the points to stay up. But again, that kind of element of player welfare comes in. So Kev McCarthy, any speculation on outgoing players? So I've kind of covered that. I've heard a lot of speculation about Scully and never hear outgoing speculation from the club until afterwards. So for instance, I know that we turn bids down for key players in the summer, and people say, well, that might be Liam Scully, or it might be Regan Poole. You never know. So it would be surprising, I think, to some fans, certain players that we have that you would think probably teams wouldn't be as interested in who actually are. And I think there are one or two players like Regan Poole, not headline grabbers, who actually are very, very highly rated around League One football, potentially the Championship. So you never know. Jason Reeve loves the walk. Thank you, sir. Mr. Hoy, you've never doubted Michael Appleton, so well respected in the game for a reason. 100%, without a doubt. I agree with that. I don't, it's like football's a game of opinions, like Michael said, and I don't always agree with the team selection or the substitutions, but I do agree with the club ethos, and that's not just from Michael. The way we play our football and the way we want to do things, term it as the method if you wish to. But, just the fact that we're a club who knows our size, we know we can't compete with the Sheffield Wednesdays and the Charltons and the Sunderlands and the Ipswiches of this division in terms of spending power. We know we won't compete with the Boltons and teams like that who, what Bolton just spent on Dion Charles, 200,000. Interesting. So we have to do things a certain way. And I believe in that. And do you know what? I think I've even said it written it down. I think if we were to go down, to then readjust what we were doing would be dangerous. I think you have to stick to a principle. It worked last season. Yeah, as we all know, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different outcomes. I think another definition of madness is doing something that was successful once and you know, giving up on it the first time that it doesn't work another time. We've had the proof it does work. So we shall see. Happy New Year, Beth. Hope you're well. That's my cousin, Darren Lund. Now then, boss. Happy New Year. Same to you, my friend. Not their forms. The team's not sure what Pete means there. I'm assuming it's in response to something I said earlier, but sorry, I have to scroll through. And sorry you're late, Steve. No problem at all. Look, that's me done. The dog is still with me. He's gone over there now. There he is. So he's been good. First dog walk of the year, and I think it's the first one where he hasn't buggered off and left me. So that's great. I'm going to get back now. Going to shoot off. Keep my fingers crossed for some news. Who knows? I don't think we'll get anything today. It'd be surprising for me. I think if we were to get anything this week, I think if we haven't got something tied up for the first couple of days, lots of players are going to kind of hold their nerve. I think the coronavirus rearing its head is going to be something that Premier League teams bear in mind right up till deadline day. So I think if we were going to take loans in, I think that there would be a case of maybe that happening later now, because teams are having games cancelled. Who knows? There might be Premier League teams who think they'll loan players out so they can get games cancelled ahead of signing players. I don't know, but I would be surprised if there was a signing this week. I think what we've got now is what we've got for Oxford. Very, very, very tough game, but the sort of game that we actually can't turn up for. MK Dons, very, very tough game, by far the better side for 60 minutes of that game. And when you look at the goals that they scored, actually at 2-0 up, you shouldn't even draw 2-2 with the chances they had. Matt O'Reilly's goal was good, well taken, but it should be stopped. And their winner was just embarrassing. And when I say embarrassing, I mean, I'm not even saying poor defending. We're saying, that's the look that you get in it when you're at that stage. So anyway, look, Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. I will strive to do a dog walk video every week if I can, but I have to wait for the right conditions. Charlie, stop drinking out the puddle, scruffy bastard. So I have to wait for the right conditions, like my dog being in a good mood, not too much wind, all that sort of stuff. So see you all on Saturday. Take care. Bye.